One cup of coffee has costed you about a couple $1,000s. You have spent about a couple $1,000s on a cup of coffee. Can you run me through that story?
Sure. It's
Welcome back to the journal. My name is Isaac. I am the host, and this is chapter 2 with Eric Mishne. Professor Mishne is a man who wears many hats here at Cedarville, and I'd love if you dove into some of those hats that you wear here, and then we can just go further into that. So a
sure.
little intro of you,
Yeah, thanks for having me.
of course.
Yeah, many hats is a good way to do that. I've never been one to just wear one hat. I've always, like my whole life, I've always had my hands in so many different things, and now is certainly no exception. Uh, Professor of communication. So I teach communication classes. I teach public speaking. I teach sort of a intermediate public speaking online communication class.
Yep.
Persuasive theory. So people jokingly call it manipulation class. It's not. We don't
No.
teach you how to manipulate anyone. But those are the three courses that I teach. I coach the speech and debate team. So that's one of the bigger roles that I have. So speech and debate, if you think about track and field, it's kind of like track and field, only for speaking and debating instead of running and jumping. Lots of different categories that you can specialize in, and you practice a speech, you get it good, you take it to tournaments, and I've been doing that since I was in high school. That's a big part of my.
Okay.
It's always been a big part of my life. The other hat, I suppose, that I wear on campus is overseeing the fundamentals of speech course that I teach, the fundamentals of speech course, but I'm also overseeing all of the professors that teach that class. So
Okay.
that's the third formal hat that I wear.
Which is your favorite hat?
Speech and debate.
Okay. Is that
Hands
just
down.
because it's always changing? Or what makes that your favorite?
It is always changing. So when I was in high school, all right. So a lot of times we look back on our lives and we see ourselves as a collection of lots of different choices we've made, lots of different people who have come and gone, and things that we've done. I can pinpoint the moment, the exact moment, the exact decision I made that changed the rest of my life. I
Okay.
was standing in my kitchen with my mom. I was homeschooled, so it was me and my mom and my friend's mom, who was the high school speech and debate coach. They were trying to talk me into taking the Intro to Public Speaking and Debate class, and I said, no way. Absolutely not. Public speaking and debate that's for nerds. That's not something I'm interested in. I mean, I did theater, so I had some artistic expression. I had some performance background, and that was my thing. But standing in my kitchen when I said, yes, fine, I'll take the intro class, because they promised me intro class is all the farther it has to go, one semester, and all your friends are doing it. Okay. I never looked back.
Okay.
Like, I took that class. I fell in love with public speaking, particularly the acting categories. So it was kind of like 10-minute monologues for competition. And I fell in love with the tournaments. I fell in love with the competition, just the preparing a speech, and just rehearsing it over and over again. I never looked back. I competed. That was my freshman year, and I full sended the rest of my high school. Sophomore, junior, senior year, I was all in to competitive speech and debate. Mostly speech. I did a little bit of debate. I wasn't very good at the debate. In fact, there were times I was pretty bad at the debate. But I did it because I knew it was good for me to learn those skills. And that's something that I've pushed myself through in various public speaking categories over the years where I'm not good at this, so I need to learn how to do that better. I need to keep doing it, even though I keep doing badly at it. Competitive success is not the only reason to do speech and debate. So that was a big thing for me. But anyway, I was hooked, and I never looked back. I did it for 3 years in college, as well as theater stuff, and started coaching almost as soon as I was done with college, coaching speech and debate. And I did some coaching while I was still in college too, for high school.
Was it here that you just jumped right into? Or
So I did, I was an undergrad here at Cedarville and did 3 years on the speech and debate team here. And it was right after that I graduated that I was coaching high school speech and debate. And then a couple years later, I came back and was volunteer assistant coaching for Cedarville's team.
Okay.
And, over the years, just sort of kept up with things. And even though there were a few years where I wasn't actively pursuing anything academic related, I was still involved in speech and debate. I was still judging, still coaching. I was a tournament administrator, so I ran some tournaments here and there. So I've really worn just about every hat there you can wear in competitive speech and debate.
That's so funny. So before speech and debate, you did theater.
Yeah, I did theater in middle school and a little bit in high school.
So you've always, I don't know how to word that, enjoyed being in front of others, speaking, pursuing an act.
Yeah.
Not necessarily an act, but pursuing
a performance.
Yes.
Yes. I've always liked performing. My mom has home videos of me, as with so many people putting on plays as kids, I was the one making my brothers dress up with me to do skits and stuff. And, so I've always been a ham. I've always liked attention. And so that's sort of always been, that performance has always been a part of what I thrive on. And even today, when I think about my role as a teacher, teaching is a type of public speaking, but it's also a type of performance.
Yes.
In a sense. Not in the performance in the sense that I'm pretending to be someone else, but in the sense that I have to present in a way that takes the ideas that I have or that I want my students to have, presents them in an understandable way. And at times there are performative elements of that. I don't want to get into some of the details of the nerdy stuff about what that means, but teaching can be a performance. You have to come in with high energy. Sometimes I don't feel like teaching. Sometimes I would rather just sit in my office and drink my cup of coffee and write my paper or do something else. But I've got to go teach, so I've got to put on the professor hat or the professor costume, right?
There you go.
And do it. So at times it's an act. Now those are rare for me. Most of the time I'm excited to get in the classroom, because I love it. When I was trying to decide where to go with my life, it was theater or it was teaching. And both are things I'm equally passionate about, equally excited to do. And so when I was applying to grad schools, I applied to grad schools in theater and I applied to grad schools in communication. And I was like, all right, God's going to put me where he wants me to be. And whatever schools I get into with the best financial aid package, that's where I'm going to go. And if I'm not supposed to go theater, then that's not going to happen. If God wants me to go theater, then that's going to be the best option. I didn't get into the theater programs with the financial aid package that I wanted. Okay. So grad school took me to communication.
There's that door opening up.
Yeah. And one door closing, another door opening.
Always will. Always will. So you started middle school being a performer. I will have the same home videos. I love being in front of the camera. I was a little jerk though. There's videos of my younger brother. So we lived in the woods in Arkansas.
Okay.
We had caught in some lizards and it was a lizard, a snake, and a frog. And I obviously got the snake because that's cooler. And I was taking a video, and I tell my brother, like, you can hear me in the background going, like, Jackson, go stand right there and then say this. And all he wanted to do was like, this is my little frog. His name's Blah, blah, blah. And the whole time you can hear me, Jackson, off, Jackson, off, Jackson, off. Until it's my turn, and then I have a whole, like, I thought out what I was going to say.
Oh, you have a
things like that.
monologue.
Yes. Like, I just loved being out in front of the camera and just performing. But hopefully, do you have siblings?
Yeah, I have 3 younger brothers.
Oh, so you're the oldest?
Yeah.
Same?
Yeah.
Pros and cons?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like one of those things that I don't know life any differently. So I don't know that I could tell you what the pros and cons are. It just was my experience. I know there are trade-offs with every situation.
They're there.
They're there, yeah. But like when I was in college and would tell people that I was homeschooled, that was back before it was quite as popular. There weren't nearly as many homeschoolers, certainly not at Cedarville. And I was like, now homeschoolers at Cedarville are, maybe half, right? I wouldn't, maybe more than a majority.
Yes.
More than a majority? Maybe a majority.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like that when I was a student. So people would ask me, "Oh, what was that like? Did you like it?" I'm like, I liked it, but it was also the only thing I knew.
Okay.
So I didn't have anything to compare it to say whether I liked it better or worse than any other schooling experience. And that's something that a lot of people have that in various different ways, right?
Was it literally theater groups that you would join, or was it from a school? Because, like, I feel like now we have, like, so I was homeschooled. I did public, private, and homeschool. Homeschool is by far my favorite.
Okay.
I think that grew my relationship with my parents far more than any of the others. But I wanted to do sports, and we just were able to go to the local public school, and I was able to join that way. Was that the same case for theater?
It was not. Our homeschool organization put on a theater production every year. So one of the moms, a couple of the moms in the group had theater background, and they directed a show, and I was a part of that. I think three major productions and a handful of smaller ones. I started directing in high school. I started directing one-act plays myself.
Okay.
Because I entered there was a homeschool, an Ohio homeschool one-act play competition that I entered in. I acted a couple times and I directed my junior year, and we won. Actually,
Okay.
that was pretty exciting. I beat up until that year. There were two moms that I knew both of them. They were in our homeschool group. Every year they would flip-flop whose one act would win. And then I came in and beat them both. Both of them I had worked under throughout my time. So it was pretty fun. It was great.
Oh, that's so funny. So you did theater. One of the moments that you said just hooked you was was it friend's mom?
Mm-hmm.
What were some of those other moments? Like, so today you still are involved in speech and debate.
Yeah.
Still involved in communication as a whole, and still putting on those hats and those outfits. What were some of those other key moments in your life that you can think back to, if any? Like, was it that win, beating those two mamas? Was it your first like big debate, or?
Oh, interesting. It's interesting. It's hard to say. I tend to always push everything back to that, and I'll tell you why. Because I joined speech and debate in high school. I made some really close friends, and that's what kept me in it in high school. It wasn't just the love of the game. It was the friendships that I had built in that competition circles. But that's the reason I came to Cedarville for my undergrad, was to do speech and debate. And it was through being at Cedarville that I ended up starting to coach high school speech and debate, because there was a group around here, a homeschool high school group that wanted a coach. And so I started coaching while I was an undergrad. And then I started coaching more after college. And it was through people at college, or excuse me, it was through people in that group that I met my wife. And it was because I was wanting to get married and be able to support a family that I decided to go to grad school, that I discovered my love for teaching by being at Cedarville and adjuncting. And it just continues to fan out because every decision I made was because I did speech and debate in high school. Or every outcome of my life is because I did speech and debate in high school. If I had not done speech and debate in high school, which means if I hadn't made that choice in my kitchen that night to do the first class, I don't even have a guess as to where I would be in life or who I would be or what my hobbies would have become.
Right.
Like I can't, I wasn't on a path already. I kind of had, I don't even think I had ideas of what I wanted to do at that point.
I mean, high school.
Yeah,
Like,
it was my freshman year of high school. If you have your life planned out for you as a freshman in high school, stop.
It's going to be a rude awakening.
Yeah. Sit down, go on a find yourself adventure, and just enjoy high school.
Yes.
Okay. If you have your life figured out when you're a freshman in college, stop.
Give it time.
Give it some time
Yep.
because it's going to change, and that's good. We should welcome the change.
Yes.
And even as I knew I wanted to teach public speaking and wanted to teach college and did grad school, I had some pretty big road bumps in grad school that made me think, well, maybe academia isn't where I want to be after all. And so as I went on some other paths, theater was one of them. I started pursuing a career directing theater after my second master's degree when I thought academia is not for me. When I was done with that, I'm like, I'm out of here. I was even ready to turn my back on forensics after that, those couple years, because I just had some rough experiences in grad school.
Yeah.
And then when I got the phone call or the Facebook message, actually, I know. How antiquated. From the department chair here now, telling me that there was a position open here and asking if I was interested.
Professor Green?
Yeah. And I had been telling him for years, let me know if you ever have an opportunity for me.
Mm-hmm.
When he reached out and said, we have an opportunity for you, I was on the track towards a job in theater.
Okay.
I couldn't not apply here. And as things became more clear and as they said, yeah, we would also want you to coach the forensics team, like be the coach, not just be an assistant coach or help out now and then, but be the coach. I was like, I can't turn that down. And I was feeling the doors closing on the theater thing that I was pursuing. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. So here I am. But again, so I am here now as a full-time faculty member, director of the speech and debate team. In my dream job, that probably wouldn't have been a dream job. It wouldn't have even existed as a dream, except for that. So as I if I were to point to other things, I can point to other moments. When I was a junior, it was fall semester of my junior year. I was of college.
Okay.
Yes, I was really struggling with my major. I was an English education major, and I wasn't doing well. Didn't have good grades. I failed 2 courses as an undergrad, like straight up Fs. And one of them I just didn't even do the final paper because I'm like, I have to get a 100% on this paper to pass the class. And I've gotten Ds and Fs on every other paper so far. So the likelihood, and I even talked to the professor, I'm like, what's the likelihood I do this? He's like, it's not likely.
That's so demotivating.
It is, but it was also realistic.
Yes.
So I chose not to run myself into the ground at the end of that semester doing something that would not yield the results I wanted. Now, that's a controversial choice. Don't know that I would make that today. Don't know that I would advise people to do that today. But that's what I did then.
Yeah.
But I was meeting with my advisor, and he said, Eric, why aren't you doing theater as your major? I see how much you're struggling. Why is theater not your major? Because he'd seen me in some of the plays. I was in theater plays. I was in the plays here at Cedarville. I was in a few of them. And I said, well, I don't want to act for the rest of my life. And I don't want to just entertain people for the rest of my life. Because to me, theater had only been entertainment, and theater had only been acting. Sure, I had done a little directing in high school, but I didn't see that as the career for me. But then either that fall or that spring, I took a directing class and a set design class. And I also started reading and seeing some plays that were not just entertaining, they were meaningful. They meant something. They were, I couldn't tell you what they are now. I don't remember which plays they were. It might have been The Shadow Box, actually. But like, you know what? If I can direct, and I can choose stories that mean something to me, and that I can say something powerful to others through this performance, and I get to choose what the story means because I'm the director, then yeah, let's do this. So theater was my minor the whole time. So I dropped all the English ed stuff, changed my major to theater, and stayed an extra year. So I had 5 years at Cedarville and with a theater major.
Okay.
And my other majors were communication for a year, I think. English ed.
Is this your journey through college?
Yeah. I started as communication, then I went to English ed, then I went just English for like less than a semester, and then theater. And it was that conversation with my advisor, and also that semester realizing theater can be much more. Performance can be much more than just entertainment and acting. That really changed how I see performance. Another pivotal moment in my life was another conversation with someone who I was adjuncting speech. I was teaching speech. I was like 25, 26, pretty fresh. And the department chair at the time, Dr. Elliott, heard some good things about my teaching. Okay, I don't remember exactly where it was, but he called me into his office and said, I've heard some good things about your teaching. If you want to keep doing this, you need to get a master's degree. I'm like, okay. And I'm like, I had to ask myself, do I want to keep doing this? And I had the bug. Like, I had the bug. I knew. I was hooked like on the second day. The second day teaching, I knew this is what I wanted. So I'm like, all right, it's grad school time. I don't want to go to grad school, but I want to teach.
That time, yeah. Yeah.
So I applied to like 2 schools. I don't even remember which ones. And then didn't get in. Then the next year was the year I got married, and my wife helped me with applications. Like, she was working full time, I was working full time, but both of our part-time jobs were grad school applications. So she would proofread my papers. At the time, she was a better writer than me. I think now, having gone through grad school, I'm probably a better writer than her. But sorry, babe. I applied to 9 grad schools.
Okay.
That second year, and I made sure my applications were buttoned up. They were good. And 2 of them were theater programs, and the other 7 were communication programs. And I said, I'm not going to go anywhere unless they offer me a full ride assistantship. So, which means I'm a grad student. They cover the cost of my classes, and I teach public speaking for them as a grad student, as a teaching assistant,
Okay.
graduate teaching assistant, GTA. And to do in exchange for me teaching as a grad teacher, they give me the coursework for free, with a stipend on top of it. That was my stipulation, because I'm like, I can't afford grad school debt. Like, that's not practical. I'm still paying off undergrad debt. So that was my line in the sand. Whichever school has the best financial aid package, and one school gave me a full assistantship, and so Western Michigan University. There I went.
There I was.
Now let's pick up and move to Kalamazoo, which was a city that people didn't even know was actually a city.
Just the same.
just a thing. That's right.
Was it theater or communication?
Communication.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. I got into one of the theater programs. The other one was a long shot. It was an MFA in directing at Boston University. It was a pretty prestigious
It's kind of fun to say you
program.
did, though.
I applied to it. That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. But I got into one other program, but they didn't offer any financial aid. So I'm like, all right,
Not it.
calm it is. Here I am.
Was Dr. Elliott. So Dr. Elliott, for context, is a sweet, older gentleman.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very wise. Love him. Love talking to him.
Mhm.
Was he scary at this time? Because you said that he told you you must go to grad school. Was it scary?
I don't think Dr. Elliott can be scary.
I agree.
I was probably a little intimidated because he was the department chair, and he was the department chair actually when I was an undergrad as well.
Okay.
He and I started at Cedarville the same year. Like, so when I came in as a freshman, was his first year as the department chair, starting.
Okay.
He had come from Hong Kong to start
Mm-hmm.
teaching the same year I started my freshman year. So
Okay.
I had a long history with him, but so I was probably a little intimidated. I wasn't scared. He wasn't scary at all.
I was just thinking, I don't even know how to picture him like being stern.
It was not stern as much as it was,
You gotta do this.
you know what? If this is what you want, this is my advice to you. You're gonna have to do that, because I only had a bachelor's degree, and you're lucky if you can get a job at a university with a master's degree without a PhD, let alone just a bachelor's. So,
Did you enjoy school?
which time and which year?
So college you switched around a lot.
Yeah,
just
so
because that was hard.
All right. Let me tell you this. My freshman year, I ended with a 1.9 GPA.
Okay.
That's bad. That's not good. And that wasn't even failing classes. I didn't fail anything that year, I don't think. Actually, that might have been the year I failed social science. Anyway, I ended up retaking that class in the summer a couple years later and doing all right. But my senior year, my second senior year, when I was a full-fledged theater major, Dean's List, both semesters.
Okay.
Because and it's not because I was a better student. It's because I was studying something I loved.
Yes.
And it was something that I understood, was able to understand, something that I wanted to pour time into. And I enjoyed, like, I loved going to every single class.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't a great student still. I still struggled with exams, but since the content was different, I got it.
Yes.
Yeah, you don't want to see my transcript for all of the gen eds. Like,
Gen eds, it's okay.
not good.
That's how I was too. Gen ed stuff, not my thing. I have dyslexia, and we didn't find that out until after the gen eds. We found out because of the gen eds.
Oh, interesting.
Just because of how I was doing
Yeah.
in them. So, not very good. But as soon as I started my communication classes, love them. I was writing a paper yesterday for one class, and then I had a communication class. Same style, like same word count almost. And I was complaining about this one and not my communication class, because I actually enjoy what I'm writing and learning
Yeah.
about. And I think
Yeah.
I think that makes all the difference.
Absolutely. It's cliche to say if you find a job you like, you'll never work a day in your life, but it's true. Cliche things hot take. Cliche things are cliche only because they're true for everyone.
Oh,
Like something's only cliche if it's true for everyone. And that so like, okay, yeah. If you find a job you like, you'll never work a day in your life. Not like there are times this job feels like work, but it's rare. It's rare. Like this week in particular, super busy. You know, I have scheduled from about 8 or 9 in the morning till 5 or 6 in the evening without a break this week, and I love every minute of it. There are days, times like 2:00 in the afternoon when I'm falling asleep. I got to remind myself this is my dream job, but it still is. I don't feel like I have to go to work. I don't say I'm going to work. I say I'm going to school, going to campus.
that's fun.
You know, I've tried very hard not to call it work because that doesn't feel like work.
It's a good mental habit. Just calling it work versus school or something that you can find enjoyment in.
I'm really particular. I tune into the language that I use a lot, and I think the language choices we make impact our attitudes and the way we see things and the way we see the world. I get on people's nerves sometimes when I try to say things like I'm gonna feed 2 birds with 1 seed instead of I'm going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, because why do we need violent metaphors for everyday tasks? We don't.
No.
It's just what we've grown accustomed to, so we say that. And if you start to think about all of the language we use that is just metaphors of violence around, and when that language influences us, we can easily color different things to make us have perceptions of things that are not reality. Or distorted versions of it.
Just an effect on everyday life, too. It's just, yeah. I mean, it's a lot harder to say the positive words than slip out a negative word or 2. And I think that's silly.
Yeah.
And I don't know. You can't do anything necessarily about that.
Right,
other than
right.
becoming self-aware. But, yeah. So, we know some of the outfits you wear.
Yeah.
Some hats, some outfits, some costumes. Internally, so you went to Cedarville Christian College.
Yep.
When did faith enter your life?
I like to say sometimes that I'm a denominational mutt because my dad grew up Jewish, conservative Jewish.
Okay.
My mom grew up Methodist. They met in college at a Church of Christ. We went to a Wesleyan church when I was really little for the first couple years of my life. Maybe the first 5 or 6 years 5 years of my life. Then a Messianic Jewish congregation for most of the rest of my life. There were 2 years we did a home church when I was 12, 13, 14. Then I went to a Church of God for the last couple years of high school. Then I came to Cedarville as a Baptist college.
Yep.
Or university. And let's see, after college, I went to a church, a non-denominational Christian church, and then a Reformed church for a few years, and now I'm back at Cedarville. So I have a lot of influences from different denominations, and so that sometimes makes my theology a little bit. I always have competing rationales for different theological positions rolling around in my head. And we can get into the theological stuff, why I land back at a Baptist theology. But I grew up around the faith. I grew up in church. My parents were Christians. My dad became a Christian when he was in college. And that's when he and my mom met at church. I accepted Christ as my Savior when I was 6, on my 8, on my 8th birthday. So it's easy for me to remember my 8th physical birthday.
Yeah.
It was my spiritual birthday too. And I think it was in that next year, maybe the year after, that I was baptized. Um, when I was 6, this is why I mixed up my numbers. When I was 6, my mom gave birth to a little boy who died at 3 days old. So I had 4 younger brothers,
Okay.
but one has passed, and the other 2 didn't exist yet. So it's kind of weird to say how many brothers I have because I've only ever had 3 at the most at one time,
Yes.
but I have had 4.
Mm-hmm.
But he died when he was 3 days old, and at 6, you don't really understand life and death that much. At least I didn't.
No. Yeah.
I just knew that he was here and then he wasn't. And sure, I cried because it's a sad. I was supposed to. It felt like it was a sad thing. But over the next year, as a 6-year-old, and then 7-year-old, I was having nightmares, recurring nightmares, and it was weird. Like it was the same nightmare over and over again, where I would cause the end of the world.
Weird.
There were two versions of the nightmare that I would have, where I would cause the end of the world, and I would wake up terrified and just in terror. There was one night I even woke up, and I had my dad was trying to comfort me, and I was saying things. I'm gonna cry because this is intense, but I was saying things like, "Where's my dad? I want my real dad," to my dad, and I have a vivid memory of that interaction. I mean, that happened. I think that only happened once. I cannot imagine what he was going through.
Yeah.
Right, but it was then at the end of that next year. So it was maybe on and off for 2 years that this was happening. It wasn't every night, but it was frequently enough that I remember it being a thing.
Yeah. Mm.
And then on my 8th birthday, when I accepted Christ, I haven't had one of those nightmares since. They stopped. And I'm not typically a person that feels like God speaks to us in dreams and mystical in those ways. I feel weird even telling the story because that's not how I typically see my spiritual life and my relationship with God. But I can't deny that I was having those dreams. Mm-hmm. And my parents verify this too, that they stopped after I made a profession of faith. And so that's when it started. And then, the rest of my life has just been a long, slow, gradual process towards God, sometimes away, but ultimately towards him.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I understand what you mean by the dreams. That's that's a hard thing to say accurately. Mm-hmm. But I mean, if you just think about it in the context of you were going through some discomfort, if you were going through fear and he replaced it with joy and peace. Granted, we're not promised that. We're promised discomfort, if anything. But that's no denying that the Lord was with you and sees you.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Sure. Do your parents have a strong faith? Did they not push, that's the wrong word. Did they encourage you along your faith journey?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, we had family Bible studies, and they were regular church attenders. So yeah, church and God was always a significant part of our family life. My dad, being Jewish, having Jewish heritage, and then going to a Messianic Jewish church for maybe ultimately probably 8 or 10 years, really influenced my understanding of the Old Testament and its role in Christianity too. And when I hear people say you can't have Christianity without Judaism, yeah, they're right. Now, Judaism today looks different than what Jesus' Judaism would have looked like, which is where we get Messianic Jews, right? The Messianic Jewish Church is attempting to be Christians the way Jesus would have been a Christian if he were to be in church, or the way the Jewish people of Jesus' day, right? The way a Jew combined with a faith in Christ as the fulfillment of the prophecies would have a relationship with God. That's the goal of Messianic Judaism, and certainly they get that right a lot. Just like with any denomination, there are things I think, maybe that's not quite right, but that's with any denomination, and I couldn't even tell you what those things might be right now. So,
yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I think that's hard. One thing is, both my parents are Christian, so I've grown up really enhancing my knowledge with Christianity, and it's become apparent like the last 2 years. I went on a missions trip. It was just Washington D.C., but it was a couple people asked me, well, why Christianity and not this, and these reasons. I'm able to defend my faith, but I didn't know why. I had no reason that they would accept because of my lack of knowledge of other faith. And I was just like, ooh, because I couldn't change anything in the moment. Like, it was hard.
One of the hardest conversations I've ever had about faith was when I was in London, England.
Okay.
And a guy walked up to me with a camera and microphone. Said, "Can I ask you a few questions?" And I'm like, it wasn't really vacation. It was half mission trip. At that point, the mission trip was over, so I was kind of in vacation mode a little bit. And I'm like, fine, let's talk. And so he started asking me if I knew any Muslims. He was a Muslim, young Muslim man, probably college age.
Okay.
He said, "Do I know any Muslims?" I said, "Not personally, no. I think I've interacted with a few." And he started asking me a few questions. What do you know about Muslims? What do you know about Islam? And pretty soon, the conversation had turned into a debate over the similarities and differences between Christianity and Islam. It became very clear to me very quickly, that he knew more about the Quran than I knew about the Bible.
Okay.
A lot more. And he knew more about the Bible than I knew about the Quran.
Mm-hmm.
And at times I started to wonder if he knew more about the Bible than I did.
Yes.
I don't think that is true. I think ultimately I know more about the Bible than he does. But and I only feel confident saying that because of our difference in interpretation of Scripture. And so he might have the same knowledge of the Bible that I have, but he does not have the same understanding of the Bible that I have.
Pierced your heart.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And when the Trinity came up, the Trinity didn't come up. One of the similarities in Islam and Christianity that I mentioned was we both believe in one God. And he said, no, you believe in three gods. I'm like, no, we have one God. He's like, no, you have Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. I'm like,
This is going to be hard.
And that is what became the really hard part in that conversation.
Yes.
I mean, it's hard for a Christian to understand the Trinity. It's really hard to defend the Trinity as one God to someone who believes that it is three different gods. And we resolved the conversation without resolution. You know, we got heated a little bit, and not intense. We weren't yelling. We were passionate. It was a passionate exchange. So cool at one point because he had his microphone and then had a camera guy with him. And I have since learned that he's a YouTuber that does street interviews and has thousands, like thousands of viewers. I don't know who those viewers are. I can't figure that out. But he has a really big following talking about Islam to people on the streets and interviewing people. But partway through the conversation, he turned to his camera guy and said, "Put that away. We're done." And his guy didn't believe him. And he said, "No, put that away. We're done. We're done with that. We're just talking now." And I'm like, it was so cool because it was at that point that I realized this is no longer a stunt for a video. We're actually having a conversation. And that was really cool because then there was a couple other folks with me and his buddy who finally put down the camera, and we had now 2 separate conversations going with his buddy and some of these folks that I was with, and then me and this guy and someone else. And it was really cool, but it was also maybe the most challenging conversation about my faith I'd ever had, because I had to answer questions that I hadn't had to answer, because it wasn't somebody asking me questions who didn't know the Bible where I could start from scratch. Mm-hmm. It was someone asking me questions who had a very strong opinion and understanding of the Bible that was different from mine.
Do you think it became a debate because of those purposes, your background, or the fact that he had defense on his end as well?
I'm not sure, because
or the YouTube stunt.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously the YouTube stunt kind of fizzled out, but I wasn't attacking Islam. Yeah. I don't know enough about Islam to attack it. I don't know what I would attack, because the only things I know are things I've heard, and I don't think it is very dangerous to take things you have heard and use it as ammunition. Because as soon as somebody pushes back, you're digging into something that you've only heard about, not actually something you know. Yeah. Which is partly why I don't really get into political debates, because I don't know politics.
Yes.
But anyway,
I'm with you.
That's a different conversation. Let's not have that one today.
I don't know enough to have that one, so that's fine.
Yeah, there you go. Sure. But there were a few things he was really pushing on, and trying to say why Islam was better in these couple areas. And, it just comes to a difference in understanding of what the two faiths are at their core, and who God is at his core. And I was very thankful we left that conversation. It resolved. Nobody stormed off.
Good.
We finally were like, I think we both realized we're not gonna change the other person's mind, and at some point we decided we're done trying to. And I don't know that I was actually ever trying to. I was just trying to defend myself. Although sometimes in defending yourself, you end up making the kind of arguments you would make if you were trying to convince someone to. So we got kind of muddy at times, but anyway, it was really cool. It turned out to be a really cool experience, even though it was really stressful in the moment.
Right. That ties perfectly into this question. How have you seen your faith intertwine with your wisdom and knowledge of speech and debate, speaking, performing, just from what you have learned through what school and just, I don't know, the experiences, the decade of or more of speech and debate? And so how have you seen that intertwine with your faith?
Yeah.
In, like, I don't know if that's too broad of a question or not, but how has faith benefited communication or vice versa?
Yeah. Communication is such an integral part of your faith, simply because we are called to share our faith. Part of our responsibility as a Christian is to share Christianity with others. That requires communication. Mm-hmm. And so we have to ask ourselves, how do we best learn about communication to be able to do the thing that God calls us to do? And you don't have to study communication to be able to share the gospel. That's not, I don't want that to be construed at all. But that is a big reason why I think communication is right for me, because like the field of communication,
Mm-hmm.
because I enjoy thinking about how to take an idea and give it to someone else. I think about the field of communication as building bridges between an idea and the person who needs that idea, needs to hear that idea. And, whether you're talking about a client for a company or a persuasive message or advocating for a cause, you always have a message. You need to figure out how to bridge the gap between the message and the person who needs it. And that's the gospel too. The gospel is a message. And so when I think about how communication influences my faith, communication allows me to practice my faith.
Ooh, okay.
Without communicating, I guess I should say, I don't think I would be practicing my faith to its fullest. Because without communicating truth, without communicating God's love, without showing people, which is a type of communication, demonstrating, role modeling who Christ is, I'm not going to be able to fully live out my faith. So that can happen. You can do that without studying communication, but studying communication for me helps me know how to do that better. And I love teaching people how to do that better. In the competitive speech and debate sphere of things, there's a lot of different kinds of speeches that we do that touch on a lot of different skills. And every type of expression can be used for different purposes. So acting, impromptu speaking, persuasive speaking, informative speaking, academic criticism can all be used to communicate about different things. And in the competitive sphere, we're sharpening those skills in very academic, very precise ways that can help us understand, help us think about ideas, and help us think about how to communicate ideas. Even though in competition, the ideas we're communicating aren't directly about our faith, we can learn more about how to communicate our faith after having done those activities. Mm-hmm. Particularly in debate, when I'm asked questions and I have to answer them. I have to answer them accurately and honestly based in data.
Yep.
I'm not just sharing my opinion about something. And it also helps us ask questions. One of the things that some camps of evangelism are about asking questions to someone to get them to eventually get them to ask what's the purpose of life, and get them to recognize their sin nature or their brokenness, and show them a need for Christ. That's questions are one method of evangelizing,
mm-hmm.
and that's something that we do a lot of, is ask questions in debate. But the other is formulate logical arguments. That's the other big thing. And there are parts of faith that aren't logical. There are parts that absolutely are. Mm. And you can fight me on that. That's okay. I'll have that discussion. But ultimately for me, when I trace why I believe what I believe all the way back, it ultimately has to come back to, no matter how much evidence for the book of Genesis there is, no matter how much evidence that Jesus was a real person and raised from the dead, there's not proof. It's a belief. For me, now there is evidence.
Yes.
Absolutely. But ultimately, I can't prove God's existence, but I believe it. Mm. And in debate, you get to a point where you're asking those same kind of questions. Prove it, prove it, prove it. And at some point, you just have to say, I can't prove it, but it is.
Yeah.
And at that point, you have to hope, at least in the competitive debate circle, you have to hope that you have supported enough of your positions to be credible enough that it is a good enough answer. And you know, it's tricky. I don't know. I question whether or not it's accurate for me to say I can't prove God exists. That's really touchy. I'd love to get into that with some theologians, which I don't claim to be. I mean, sure, I study the Bible, so technically I'm a theologian, but not professionally.
Yes.
Oh
yeah. That's
anyway,
an interesting one, though.
I've kind of circled around your question a little bit, but studying communication ultimately helps me live out my faith.
Agree.
And helps me know how to. And one of the easiest ways of living out my faith is how I treat other people. And communication is a huge part, if not the most important part, of how you treat other people. Yeah. And I want to treat people with kindness. I want to treat people the way Jesus treated people. And so I study Jesus. I study the Bible. I'm working through a big study right now of every verse in the Bible that talks about anything remotely related to communication.
Ooh.
And it's a long process. And I'm collecting every single verse that talks about human-to-human communication. I'm not looking at God communicating to people or us talking to God. I'm looking at what does the Bible say about how people communicate with each other and how they should. And I'm not far enough along to have any conclusive findings, except that I know there's a few verses that really jump out to me about how we should communicate with each other. Things like not stirring up anger, being patient, speaking only what is good for building others up, as fits the occasion that it may benefit those who need. Yep. Ephesians 4:29, kind of my life verse on communication. And so there's so many principles that the Bible has for how we communicate with people that if you look at Jesus' life, he does all of those too. And the only times Jesus really gets upset and angry and harsh with people are with Christians or religious people. You know, we didn't have Christians then, yes. But with the Jewish faith, leaders, yeah. He was the kindest person to anybody who wasn't a person of faith, and I don't see that a lot in Christians today. I think we're getting better. I think there's at least the people I'm around I see getting a lot better. Not across the board. Agree. Areas to grow.
Yeah, my favorite thing is communication, verbal. It's also nonverbal, and it's I don't know if I made this up or if I heard it somewhere and I've just said it. So I don't know if it's by me. If so, that's awesome, or it's by someone a little bit cooler than me.
I'll tell you. No, just
if you know. But it's for sharing the gospel. We should aim to try to share Christ and use words only when possible or only when necessary.
Yeah.
So, and
I do know what you're saying. There's a I forget who said it, but it's something like share the gospel, period. Use words when necessary, or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
That's almost exactly what you said. There's a quote somewhere by somebody.
Someone cooler. Yeah, that's what
I don't know about somebody cooler. Somebody with more street cred.
Right.
No offense.
Right. No, I agree with that. And then that's really cool. My Bible is opened up right here. I was praying before this conversation just for wisdom, and the verse I opened up to, Colossians something. Can't remember exactly. It's right there. It's opened up to it. But it just talks about how every conversation spread light, spread seed, and speak with intent. And I was going into this, obviously, it's number 2, chapter 2 of the journal. I was nervous. And that was just like reassurance, like, okay, just here to just talk, share the gospel, talk.
Yeah.
And it's just reassuring. But the Bible tells us exactly how to effectively communicate. And also, that's
Mm.
not necessarily with words.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like communication as a whole is turning into a weapon and not a tool in our society, in the world that we live in.
Yeah.
I see it, I think, hurting others than building up others. That's why weapon versus tool.
Yeah. And I you know, not to go all media theory on us or anything, but that is my perception of the world as well,
Mm-hmm.
because it's what I see.
Yes.
It's what I see happening. And I wish I knew that wasn't the case across the board. But because the media shows us the negative, because that's what sells. It's what we see, and it's what we think the world is.
Mhm.
There's a communication theory. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it essentially creates the reality through how much of something we see. If this is the only type of content that we see, we assume that this is the way the world is.
Right.
And I would like to believe that there's a lot more good with communication being done than I'm seeing. And my optimistic self, which I'm pretty optimistic most of the time. At least I say that I am. I think sometimes I worry that I am a pretend optimist, a fake optimist. But I'd like to believe that there's a lot more good being done than we're seeing,
I agree.
and that we're just the bad is just what we're seeing more of.
Yeah, that's the world. I feel like it portrays the evil in it more than the good.
Yeah,
That's bound to
evil sells.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think our world seeks the good.
Yeah, I don't know. I like
I say
from an
that with-
entertainment standpoint, it is more entertaining to watch bad stuff than it is to watch good stuff.
Yeah. Maybe the word long is better. The world does long for good,
Yes, the world longs for good.
but it doesn't show it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That might be a better,
It might be. Yeah.
less controversial phrasing.
Yeah. I think you're right.
What are hobbies that you have?
Hobbies?
Mm.
I play a little video game now and
Okay.
then. I play Minecraft. I played through Skyrim twice.
Never touched it.
I've played the Zelda games.
Okay.
Most of them, not all of them. I'm doing Breath of the Wild. No, Tears of the Kingdom now. I've kind of set those aside. I haven't had much time recently. I've been writing is also another hobby. So I've
Ooh.
set aside some of my more fun. Not more fun. That's not what I mean. Like I've set aside some more hobby-like things for more academic-like hobbies, like writing, or listening to podcasts. I love listening to podcasts and learning a lot of stuff, and I get to use that in my job too in forensics. So I'll write stories that my students will perform for competition,
Okay.
and a lot of the podcasts I listen to give us topics for speeches that we can use, or I can use for research ideas and things. Coffee is also a big hobby of mine. I drink a lot of coffee. It started during COVID, just as
Wow, that's recent.
as a hobby,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
I was drinking coffee before,
Okay.
but it wasn't a lifestyle until COVID, when I needed something to do. And I'm like, well, let me learn about coffee and learn how to make better coffee at home. And so I kind of became a home barista. I started an Instagram account that I don't really post much to anymore. But it was my home barista, outlet. And so I followed people from all over the world and recorded way too many coffee videos.
That's so
in my
fun.
kitchen. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And so my COVID hobby became a big hobby, and I have a full setup of coffee in my office, and duplicate copy plus some at home. Yeah.
Did it come from trying to save money or just enjoying coffee and wanting to enhance that?
Partly just enjoying coffee and wanting to enhance it. It wasn't really about saving money, although if I were to buy every cup of coffee out, I would definitely in the long run have saved money from what I do at home.
I was going to ask that next.
Like even if I only paid $3 for a cup of coffee out, if you add up all the coffees I've drank at home, I've saved a lot of money. Certainly coffee that I make at work in my office, because I'll probably make 2 to 3 cups of coffee a day in my office. And if I were to go next door to the campus coffee shop and buy that every time at $3 or $4 a pop,
it adds up.
That would add up a lot. And when I pay anywhere from $13 to $18 for a bag of coffee, and I get 15, 20 cups of coffee out of it, that saves a lot of money.
I would agree.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on K-Cups? I understand.
Dirty water. I don't like them. Yeah. I've not had a good one maybe ever. Now an espresso machine, Nespresso pods, that brand name is, or a little better sometimes. Don't like the flavored coffees in those, but if it's just espresso through an espresso machine, those I'm okay with. But I don't really like the K-Cup thing.
Is it an art or a skill? Coffee making.
Coffee making?
Mm.
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely both.
You can make it artsy.
Well, there's latte art for sure.
Yes.
One thing that I love to nerd out about is temporary art. It's like sandcastles and sidewalk chalk.
Okay.
Right? It's by nature, it's temporary. A sandcastle is only there until it rains.
Mm.
A latte art is only there until you drink it. It is another form of temporary art. I wrote a paper in grad school about the classroom teaching as temporary art, making the argument that what we do in a classroom is art. First of all, I had to make that argument, but second, that it's temporary. And I don't remember the details about it. The effects of it are permanent, but the artistic expression itself is temporary. Like a lecture or a classroom activity, temporary, and if you ascribe to it being art, then it therefore is temporary art. Like the title of the paper was The Sandcastle Classroom.
That's cool.
Yeah. I should pull that out and read it again. It's been a while since I've read that paper.
No, I agree. The methods have changed, but the benefits are there.
Yeah. And even like the act of being in the classroom as a student is like watching if we're going back to the idea of teaching being a performance of some sort, if the teacher is the performer performing a piece of art for the students or creating an interactive piece of art for the students to engage with, they are participants in the art. But as soon as they leave the classroom, the artwork is over, is done, like has completed. And then there's just its effects. Just like any other piece of art has long-lasting effects, classroom is the same way.
I would agree. Ultimately, yeah.
But coffee is also an art.
Contemporary.
A contemporary art, that's right. Specialty art. Because there's an art to knowing what coffees taste good blended together. Right? There's an art to the timing of pulling a shot of espresso. There are skills that you need to execute that art, just like there are in any art. You have to have skill to execute it at a high level. But you asked, is it art or is it
an art or a skill?
Or a skill? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would agree. So ultimately, you saved money for making it at home. Give or take.
I think ultimately I have for now.
And it's better. You like it more. Yes.
I say for now because there's a funny recurring joke I see on Instagram where it's just a GIF of somebody laughing with the caption, I told my wife we were going to save money by making all of our coffee at home. And the GIF is that the person's laughing because as you get into coffee, home coffee more and more and more, you just start buying more and more expensive equipment. I'm kind of in the market right now to bump up to the next level at home, which is with an espresso machine, like an actual espresso machine at home.
They're hefty.
I'm not going to buy the one that I really want,
Okay.
which is like $6,000, and that's cheap. Maybe it's mid-range, right? You can buy $10,000, $20,000
Yes.
espresso machines.
That's wild.
It is. Most of by the time you get to 10 or 20 grand, you're probably looking at one with several different, like a big one that would go in a shop. But even for home espresso machines, a few grand is nothing, right? I'm not going to do that. At least I tell myself that.
But you kind of want to.
I want to.
Yeah.
And I can get one for $500 that's pretty good quality, but that's $500.
Yeah.
So like I've got it picked out. I've got it in my shopping cart. I've got all the accessories, knowing exactly where I'm going to get them. I just haven't quite pulled the trigger because of the price tag. Like I've always been the kind of person that asks, what better thing could I spend this money on?
Yeah.
What is a more valuable expenditure of this money for me or for someone else? Like, can I justify dropping $700 on a home coffee setup when I know how much $700 would benefit people that I know who don't make a lot of money? And like, you know what? If I gave somebody $700 and didn't buy my coffee equipment, that would be a huge blessing in their life. And I'm kind of talking myself into that right now, actually. I got to think about that.
Yeah.
But I always ask, I always have to think about how much money I spend on things because I'm just very conscious of wanting to do good with the resources I've been given.
Be stewards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And doing good can be taking care of yourself, making sure you are in a good place in life. And, you know, if I'm going to be a happier, more productive person in the world because I have a $600 espresso machine, okay.
You can offer those around you. I
could. But you know what? And that's the other thing too. You know, when we do home improvements at the house that aren't necessary but are really nice, we think, you know what? This is going to be a nicer space now for guests. Mm-hmm. And when we have students over or we have family over, or like, we're going to be able to serve people through this thing we have at home. And so I've thought about that too. I don't really make coffee for a large group of students when they come over to my house because the way I make coffee right now is really tedious and time consuming. And it's just not, I'll spend an hour making coffee instead of socializing with my guests. If I had an espresso machine, crank that out in like 15, 20 minutes. You know, crank out a bunch of lattes in 20 minutes.
Pros and cons.
Pros and cons. And so could my $700 coffee corner be a service to my future potential hypothetical guests? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I could justify that, right? Anyway, those are the questions I have in my head.
Yeah. Is it accurately priced in your opinion or too much? I feel like everything's too much. But because it goes back to the art. I feel like art in general has the mindset of that's okay, expensive, that it's art.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know enough about how those things are made and sold to answer that question for that. I do believe in paying for quality. And I do believe in paying a person for the years they have put into learning how to do something and doing the thing. So, like the espresso machine that I'm looking at is handmade in Italy.
That's cool.
And at least that's how it's marketed. And I'm fine paying, you know, a $500. I think it's $549, excuse me. I haven't looked at that number that many times. $5.49. Because I know I'm paying for a quality product, and I'm paying people who are skilled at making those. At least I'm gonna assume they are.
Yeah.
There was a funny little anecdote I heard. I don't remember which artist it was. Maybe it was totally hypothetical, but someone in the Van Gogh sphere of things, Picasso, maybe, I can't remember, met someone at a bar, and this is probably just an anecdote. They met them at a bar, and they said, "Hey, draw me a picture." So okay, drew a picture on a napkin, and said, "There you go, sweet. Can I have that? It'll cost you $600 or whatever." I'm like, "Why? You spent 10 minutes doing that?" "Yeah, but I have a lifetime of skill that led me to be able to do that." And so I believe in paying people for the skills that have got them to be able to do the thing, which is why I almost always tip baristas. Every time I do an espresso drink, especially if it's a milk one, $2 tip almost always. So I'm almost always paying $6 for a drink because $4 cappuccino, $2 tip. There you go. And I know it's a 50% tip, but if they're a good barista, I want to reward them for that. Now, I won't do that at Starbucks. No offense if anybody works at Starbucks. But most Starbucks employees don't have a lifetime of skill or the intense training to make a good quality cappuccino. Again, I'm sorry to my Starbucks friends. Please prove me wrong. Push a button.
There you are.
There you go. There's not as much skill in that. So I don't necessarily tip as much as Starbucks.
Yeah.
Maybe I should.
That's small.
What's that?
I said your grande that's small.
Your
Their
grande that's
me
huge.
so much.
Right? Yeah. It's yeah. We can talk about Starbucks another time. I don't want to devalue the individuals who work at a place.
Yes.
I definitely don't. Arguably, there's less skills working at Starbucks than there is at a specialty coffee shop.
It's made to be fast.
Yeah.
And it is. And they specialize in that.
Yeah.
So they're good at being fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
There you go.
Oh, I hate myself for dogging on Starbucks right now publicly and the employees. I don't mean to do that.
No. But so going from the value of a place,
Yeah.
the value of the story, so skill set, what they've gone through. One cup of coffee has costed you about a couple $1,000s. You have spent about a couple $1,000s on a cup of coffee. Can you run me through that story?
Sure. It's probably not a couple $1,000s,
Okay.
but I did go to Dusseldorf, Germany,
That's fun.
just to go to a coffee shop. So last summer, my wife and I were planning a trip through Europe, and we were trying to figure out where we were going to go. We were planning in a short amount of time because some plans changed. And we're like, well, we know we're going to Amsterdam, and we know we're going to go to Luxembourg next. But our lodging between those two places was one night off. So we had one night we wanted to spend somewhere else. So like, well, what are we going to do on that other night? And I'm like, okay, so this barista and this cafe roaster that I've been following since 2020 when I started my Instagram on during COVID is in Dusseldorf. What if that's our extra stop? So we took a day out of our trip, or we spent that day. It was actually 2 nights, I think, in Dusseldorf, Germany, just to go to that coffee shop.
Was it what you were expecting?
Yes.
Okay.
It was, the cappuccino was not the best cappuccino I've ever had, but it was so cool to be there.
Environment.
Okay. It was so cool to be there. And I have to tell a bad story on myself. Oh, I hate myself so much for this story. The morning.
And just like that, part 1 of this episode is over. Thank you for watching chapter 2, part 1 with Eric Mishne. Sorry for leaving you on the cliffhanger. If you want to watch part 2, it will be out here shortly. So go ahead and consider giving me a follow. Thank you for watching the video all the way through.